from other parts of the world. This session is very interesting because it deals with digitalizations, markets and assets. So I'm Davide Aceso Garcia, I'm professor at Sapienza University of Rome. I mainly work in the energy transition topics, including renewables and how the renewables penetration can be increased in the market and in the grid and in the societies. So as you already know, the digitalization is one of the key pillars for the future investment, together with the decarbonization targets, the decarbonization of our societies. And these are two main topics that mainly they can work parallelly. For example, in the EU Green Deal perspective, we can see that the main funds are related with the energy sustainability and the digitalization. So I think that this session can give us, the two speakers we have, the two experts we have here with us today, they can give us very interesting information for our new perspectives and researches and business activities. So we have here with us as the first speaker, we have Jan Angerwood, that is the head of communication and market research, and also a member of management board at Next Kraftwerk from Germany. And I have seen he provides information about the integration of renewable energies into existing grid and structures and energy market using virtual power plants. So virtual power plants is the main topic of his speech, and I will give the floor to him for his intervention. Thank you, Jan.
Thank you, Davide, and thank you for having us and giving us the opportunity to show a little bit what we do with virtual power plants in Germany and other neighboring countries in Europe. And I brought some slides that I would like to share. I hope you all can see them now. So basically, you already mentioned it, Davide, that digitization is one of the trends definitely that we are seeing in the energy transition. And the data behind that is pretty easy to understand because, as you all know, decentralization of power generation means that there is a larger number of single power plants to electrify basically, or to comply with the electrical needs, you could say, of the population. So in the example of Germany, we see that in 1990, so 30 years ago, there were only 800 power units producing or generating the power that was needed for the entire nation. Today, this number has risen to well over 1.6 million units, mainly, of course, due to solar and wind. So if you have this large number of single units that all in all produce the same amount of electricity, of course, or slightly higher amount, of course, but than before, you will need some kind of, let's say, intelligence of coordination, especially when you're dealing with reliable renewable energies like solar and wind. Otherwise, it would be almost impossible to balance out fluctuations in the grid. And in order to do this with a high number, with this very large number of single units, you need some form of automated, completely automated, digitalized system that will allow you to steer, basically, to monitor and steer those, let's say, 1.6 million as a whole. Of course, this is easy today compared to 30 years ago. Luckily, we have other means than our fathers basically had when dealing with the automated coordination of single entities, let's say. And today, of course, we can use very cheap and very reliable technology to manage even such a high number of decentralized generation. So what is a virtual power plant? A virtual power plant is basically a platform, a hub, to network thousands and thousands of units that produce or consume or store electricity. Those units are highly decentralized in Germany, but also elsewhere. And what we basically do as the operator of a virtual power plant is we try to aggregate the information about those units in one single place, in one platform. So we install a remote control unit at each unit, at each generator, or each storage unit, or each participating consumer. Or we may also use existing hardware that is already built in into the setup of the generator. For example, if we are looking at larger solar parks, we see that we can use the existing data logger of the inverter, for example. So we don't need to set up our own hardware. So depending on the technology that we work with, we either set up our own remote control unit or we use an existing one. This way we get live data from the asset. Now this seems trivial, but I can tell you that even in Germany, also in Germany, in like 10 years ago, it was unheard of to have live data as a private company. We are not a grid operator. As a private company, to have this data at hand, live data from all those from all those distributed units. Even the grid operators wouldn't necessarily have live data from all those units. So what we do with this live data is we mesh it basically with other data that we aggregate on our platform. For example, weather forecasts. For example, the individual operational restrictions of each asset, which may not seem very intuitive when we are talking about solar and wind, because they have to produce when there is wind or sun. But when we are talking about more flexible generation, or about storage units, or about consumption units, there are restrictions, of course, that we have to take into account. For example, minimum requirements for producing electricity, maximum requirements for producing electricity, heat generation that comes with the electricity generation, for example, in the bioenergy field, etc., etc. Then we also need actual prices from the power exchange. We need forecasts of those prices from the power exchange. We need control reserve set points from the TSOs. So they use us to balance fluctuations in the grid. So we get commands basically from them, from their central command, you could say. Then the users themselves, so the operators of renewable energy assets, they type in basically data on their maintenance, on non-availabilities, etc. And we also take in, of course, historical data, measured data from grid operators. So we put all this together, put it into our algorithm so that we will basically have one optimized operational schedule for each unit that is networked into our virtual power plant. And then we use the same remote control unit we use to aggregate the information to send this information to the plant, to every single renewable unit, in order to tell them basically what to do. Should they produce more power? Should they produce less power? Should they be curtailed? And so on and so on. And this not only works with renewable energies, as I already mentioned, it also works with storage units. You have to tell a storage unit when it would be the best time to take power out of the grid and store it in a battery or whatever, or use it to make hydrogen, and so on and so on. The goal, of course, is economical. It is to enhance the income, or to increase the income that the operators of the units that are networked in our virtual power plant that they have. It may also be not only to have additional income, but another point is, especially with solar and wind, is to decrease the risks of trading. Because trading, of course, is something that we also do with the aggregated capacity of our virtual power plant. By the way, we have aggregated right now, we have aggregated around 10,000 units in our virtual power plant. So we can steer and control 10,000, more than 10,000 units from our command system, let's say, from our central control system, amounting to about 10 gigawatts. None of those 10 gigawatts are operated or owned by us. We are only the aggregator, the trader for this capacity. But when you're dealing with such large capacities, especially with fluctuating sources like solar and wind, you have a lot of risk in trading. What is this risk? One risk is very easy to understand, the difference between the day-ahead market and the intraday market, at least when you're dealing on liberalized spot markets, but also in some other countries where you don't have liberalized day-ahead and spot markets, there sometimes is a similar mechanism where you basically nominate the power that you will feed into the grid the next day through your balancing group to the TSO, for example. And then on the actual day of delivery, on the intraday market, let's say, you will be measured against your forecasts from the day before, from the day ahead market. And so it's imperative basically to have as few deviations from your forecasts as possible, which is of course impossible again, because as we all know, solar and wind are hard to control and are hard to predict, are difficult to forecast. But then again, if you have a very good intraday forecast using data aggregation, for example, the way I just showed in the slide before, you will know earlier, you will know early enough that your portfolio will be behaving in a different way than you had expected and you had nominated to the TSO. So you still have enough time to balance out the imbalance, you could say, in your own portfolio, in your own forecast for your own portfolio. So this is one thing that we do, renewable energy sources power trading. We trade 10 gigawatts of installed capacity, basically, on different European spot markets, and try to manage the costs associated with forecast deviations, for example. But then the second point is we also use our virtual power plant, as I mentioned before, to deliver basically short-term reserves to the transmission system operators in Germany, but also in some neighboring countries in Europe. How does this work? It's pretty easy to understand. Once you have a networked capacity of 10 gigawatt at least, or even if you have a fewer amount of capacity that you have networked, you have flexibility, especially if you have something like bioenergy or batteries or flexible power consumers in your portfolio. And then we use that flexibility, this basically capacity to produce more or less on short notice to use power when it is actually there, or to only produce power when it is actually needed, to make money by providing these reserves to the transmission system operators. So today, we are active with 8 transmission system operators in Europe, 4 of them in Germany, 4 of them in other countries. And by aggregating so many units, we can split up the signal that we get from the transmission system operator that he sends us in order to get the reserve on very short notice that he or she needs to keep the grid frequency at 50 hertz. And we take that command, basically. Let's say in this example, we have we got a command of 30 megawatts downward within seconds into our portfolio, into our virtual power plant. And we take that signal of minus 30 megawatt and split it up within milliseconds into hundreds and possibly thousands of individual signals and commands that we then send to the network units, which will then follow according to the command, which will adjust their power production or their power consumption according to the command that was given by the central control system of our virtual power plant. And by doing that, they provide reserves, basically, of flexibility to the transmission system operator, who then again can easily avoid blackouts. So we have a very stable supply of electricity by using aggregated renewable energies to counter the imbalances in the grid that they themselves often cause. The revenue that we make on those markets, we split up between the operators who own the assets that we are steering, that we are optimizing, and the other half, or the other part, it's not necessarily half and half, but the other part goes into our pockets. Since basically all countries in the world that are progressing on the transformation towards a higher share of renewable energies in their system have this challenge of managing not only the high number of decentralized units coming on to the system, but also the fluctuations that go along with it. And we see a large interest in our virtual power plant technology. So we have decided to basically offer our virtual power plant as a service, so that we don't open up shop in every country of the world, but that we present every interested party to use our technology to build up their virtual power plant, basically. For example, in Japan, we have a very good collaboration with different energy companies in Japan, in the UK, etc., etc. So we are beginning to basically export the technology behind the virtual power plant and behind the business case to allow third parties to build up their own system. Yeah, very happy. One last thing, because this is a question that I get often. So what types of units take part in a virtual power plant? And as you can see, there are different types, obviously. So we have a lot of bioenergy, especially in Germany. So we, as a company, we were very focused on bioenergy in the beginning, because bioenergy obviously is very flexible. It's easy to turn on and off and to adjust power production on very short notice. The biogas can be stored, etc. So it's a very good technology for a virtual power plant. But also solar and wind, especially when it comes to forecasting and trading and intraday trading of forecast deviations. We have hydropower, which has some kind of flexibility as well. We have CHP units, natural gas CHP units sometimes. So decentralized natural gas CHP. We have larger renewable power plants, which can be waste incendiary plants, which can be wood-fired power plants, etc., etc. Then we have power to X. We see the first power to gas units coming online in Germany, and we are integrating them into our virtual power plant as well. We have mostly C&I consumers that may have some latency in their energy consumption and their electricity consumption, which we then again can use to aggregate flexibility for the transmission system operators. But also, we haven't even put it on the slide yet, we have a couple of first projects with aggregated EVs, so that we can use the batteries built into the EVs to balance out the grid. We have shown that in the Netherlands in a pilot project with a smart charging company, as they call themselves. So they basically provide EV charging services in the Netherlands, and with the Dutch TSO, we have aggregated a couple of hundreds of EVs in order to provide the TSO with balancing energy, with control reserve. Stationary batteries are also part of our virtual power plant, and also right at the beginning, at the moment, it's not so much a focus, but when we founded the company 10 years ago, We also worked a lot with emergency power generators. So not renewable generators, to be true, but highly decentralized power generators that remain idle most of the time, and that you can aggregate to inject basically electricity into the system when it is needed, and not only for the building where they are, what their first objective is of course, but also for the grid in general. Okay, and I'm happy to answer questions if there are any. Thank you, and back to you, Davida.
Thank you very much, Jan, for your very interesting and very clear presentation of the potentialities of virtual power plant. Actually, I'm involved right now in Horizon 2020 project about geographical island flexibility, and we are dealing also with some virtual power systems. So good to know what you are the potentialities of your companies and what you are doing. I think there is a room also for cooperating, and as you have said, the number of applications are very huge. So, for example, in our cases, we are applying in a small island for the decarbonization of small island.
Yes.
So trying to foster the penetration of renewables there. Actually, if the audience has some answer, some questions, they can use the chat for writing a question and answer. And I forgot to tell it at the beginning of the session, so I can see right now any questions. So, but if you have some question to make also to Jan in the following minutes, I think we can discuss it at the end of this session, as we have only 2 speakers. So it's a small but interesting session about the digitalization. As regard one question from my side, as regard the use of virtual power plant, is it better? There are some suggestions for integrating renewables, including both electrochemical storages or power to gas, hydrogen production. It's the same, or there are some particularities for options for this different option, starting from renewables production for variable energy production?
Oh, I think we can talk for 5 hours just about that particular question, because it all depends on the time frame of that you use the single asset for. So what we see, or what we have seen as a success of virtual power plant technology, not only of our own virtual power plant, but in general in Germany and in Central Europe, is that virtual power plants already today are in a very good position to balance out intraday fluctuations. So, for example, if you just imagine when the wind front is coming, basically. So sometimes the wind front is coming 5 minutes earlier than expected, and sometimes it's coming an hour later than everybody expected. And this leads to a lot of turbulences in the energy markets, on the spot markets, basically, because that power was already sold and now it's coming 1 hour later, right? And this is something where virtual power plants can really help, because first of all, they know earlier, or that they know very early, because they have this aggregated data that this wind front will be coming later. So they give an impulse basically into the market to buy or to produce electricity for this particular hour that the wind is still missing, let's say. Or if you take the sun going up in the morning, you have a very steep ramp, especially if you have a high penetration of solar. And this ramp can be extremely, I mean, sometimes it's difficult to manage because it's very steep. And so you need a lot of other assets that may help you to basically integrate that electricity into the grid. And so virtual power plants today, they have a lot of units that are able to basically shift their time of action of electricity production, of generation or consumption or storage around those, let's say, events in the short term. And this is very important. So I think today the development of virtual power plants has been very successful for, let's say, short-term applications, intraday applications, a couple of days in advance. If you're looking, but there is, of course, the other question, what about seasonal flexibility? What about, what do we do, especially in Germany? Right now, November is usually the month where we have still a very high, comparably a high penetration of conventional power plants, whereas renewables in Germany usually produce a lot of electricity in spring and summer. Because in November, we don't have that much sun in Germany and not that much wind either. It's not the spring, the spring, there are the first storms, etc. So we get a lot of wind. And what do we do in November? And then this is something that the virtual power plant alone, of course, cannot solve. So we will need some kind of backup capacity. For example, from power to gas, what you just mentioned, if I understood correctly. So where we need a technical, let's say, not a technical, but we need a certain asset type that is able to provide large amounts of power on short notice. If wind and solar are not there. But nevertheless, this is still something that we need to solve, I guess, that we need to build up, although the technology is already there, but we need to basically implement it into our systems. But already today, and then virtual power plants may also be of value, because even then you need to know, when should I produce hydrogen and when should I not produce hydrogen, and when should I burn the hydrogen, and so on and so on. So sometimes I like to think of virtual power plants as basically just, a system that tells you when it is most important, but also most valuable to take action. So like a switchboard, basically, that tells you when to speak louder and when to speak lower, and when to produce more energy and when to produce less energy. And if you use that switchboard, let's say, for short-term purposes, for intraday trading, for intraday balancing of fluctuations, or if you then will use it once the assets are in place for seasonal flexibility, remains to be seen, let's say. But the virtual power plant per se is very open to go.
Okay, thank you again for this clarification. So I think we can now go forward with our next speaker, that is Alan Pam Guanchong, it's the Chief Transformation Officer of wind turbine manufacturer Goldwind from China. And his speech will be about the electricity trading, I think giving us a Chinese perspective, but it's a very international company dealing in all over the world. So I think it's a very, very interesting topic. Also, this one of the electricity trading in our new markets and assets from the Goldwind point of view. So thank you, Alan. The floor is yours.
Thank you, David. My name is Alan Pan. For some of those who don't know Goldwind, Goldwind is a turbine manufacturer in China, and in the past 10 years, we've been number one in domestic market, and globally, we've been second and third position for the wind turbine manufacturing. Well, this is about a company. Okay. Well, I will take a couple of minutes to introduce a little bit of China electric market. As you all know, China is in the past 30 years, we've been in kind of the phase of reforming everything. So the electricity market is one of those reforms. Well, the whole process can go through like in the early days, we put more money into electricity supply. Like before, I would be only government-run power supply, and as the investment went in more and more, then the capital and the supply of money will support more electricity generation. As time goes to like 1988 through 2002, we kind of go to a series of separation. Like in those times, the separation of government and enterprise. Before, it's only run by government. And later on, we have more enterprise, more company goes in. And then as more company goes in, we separate the generation and the transmission. We call it like we have two great companies and five huge power generation groups, and those other groups. From 2002 through like 2015, we deepened the reforms. Like we have more regulations on the electricity market. We have competitive bidding. We have regional market, and we have a series of measures to support those reforms, those electricity market. So as you can see that China has been going through a long time to make running electricity market like a business, taking from the government. I think you've been through very mature market like in Europe and US and Japan, but China, we are new here. I see this. This is the China's electricity market structure. I think very similar to the Western countries' structure. We have power plant as a generation, and we have two markets, wholesale and retail. And the wholesale will take from power plant and the retail company to submit offer, and then transactions. For retail, retailing companies will sell electricity, will buy electricity for their customers and buy from wholesale market. I think this is the process you probably all know. Well, the current status here in China, about 70% of trading, 70% of total consumption is from the trading. In China, almost all provinces have a wholesale market, 32 now. And among 32, we have 13 spot market trials. And all those 13 spot markets have renewable energy transactions. In total, in China, we have 20,000 retailers more, and very high turnover rate, very high. And in general, we have 70 medium long-term contracts and the 30 spots. So this is the current status of China. As you probably see that we are still in the process of reform. Well, for Goldwind, we participate all those activities in those market reform. Like in the wholesale market, we call ourselves supply aggregator and load aggregator. As Young just introduced virtual power plant, probably more focus on the supply aggregator. But Goldwind here, we play two roles: supply aggregator and load aggregator. About some numbers for supply aggregator, on the generation side, we have annual sales 20 billion kilowatt hours, and about 150 renewable plants, wind and solar, and 14 provincial market registered and 4 renewable spot market participate. For the retail side, we have annual contracts of 15 billion kilowatt hours, about 1,500 customers, 13 provincial market registered, and 5 renewable energy spot market participate. Overall, we manage about 10 gigawatts assets, and about 60% of those 10 is 6 gigawatts is owned by government. So we are not only sell turbines, but also we own wind and solar farms. This is our business. This is the overall picture. As probably you all know that this is the process for supply aggregator business. You know, we take power from generation from all the type of farms, and we aggregate those power and flexibility and submit offer to the wholesale market. And meanwhile, we take some actions on control for the flexibility on the generation side. Of course, we have settlement between ourselves and the wholesale market. And here is the technology platform, very similar to the virtual power plant. We have aggregation to aggregate all the generation power from the generation. We have trading. Trading basically is about the forecast, and trading is about the optimization. So based on the forecast of load and price, and you make calculations to optimize all the trading volumes. So this is the key of the supply aggregator practice. We have some agent service system to support the transaction between supply those farms and ourselves. And model, of course, the model to forecast like electricity price, the power forecast, the load forecast, and we have to manage those assets and to manage the position, to manage the credit of the opponent, risk management. And those are the models as the foundation of the application. Here are some numbers just to showcase how our work has been done for the application. Like before, we have used some AI methods to calculate the price, but the accuracy is low, like only up to 80%. We use aggregate AI technology and to make a forecast, but for the price forecast, and the accuracy could up to the 92%. So make a huge improvement by using technology. Second case is before we submit the real-time spot market for the offer by manual. As you can understand, the speed, the accuracy is very low, and of course we have penalty too. But by using real-time submission and to the wholesale market, we make a big improvement. Like we reduce errors, we improve efficiency. Of course, we hugely reduce the penalty and increase price accuracy. So all those practice in the generation side, supply aggregator, and this is our practice. Of course, we still in the process to improve. For the load aggregator, here's the process. we aggregate the load and flexibility from retail market. Of course, it's the consumption, is industry companies, commercial companies, and then we make offer. And in the meantime, we control the flexibility on the consumption side. So this is the overall mechanism. We have a platform. This platform is helps us to connect to the whole wholesale market, to connect to the equipment at the edge, and of course to connect with our customers, those industry companies, those commercial companies. For the equipment side, we have smart control, just like Yang just described. We have almost real time to control the equipment so that to balance, to make the optimal output through those controls. And for the commercial part, we can offer our customers the best total solution. For example, the price. For example, the service. Whatever they need, we can work with them to make a best total solution. For example, we have power efficiency management to make improvement on how to use their electricity. We also have a diagnosis on how they manage their power system. So all these services can be in part of our retailing services. So it's not only just sell the electricity to them, but also we have energy solutions for their manufacturing, for their business. So this is our overall business model. In terms of technology, we have applications like customer management to manage the relationship between us, to manage the settlement, to manage the dispatching among all those requirements, manage the position. Of course, we have BI analysis to analyze all the transactions. And then we have models like the model to focus price, to focus power, to focus load. And also we have value at risk. And here's some examples. And the load forecast for us is very critical. And by using a very efficient model, we can make the accuracy, the focus accuracy up to almost 100%. And this is the real case in our Jiangsu province. So if we have very good accuracy, focus accuracy, we can avoid deviation penalty. And of course, we can gain arbitrage from the system. Value-added risk is another practice here in the retail side, very important. If a customer is higher risk, for example, their business is not stable, then we can charge more money for them. If some other companies are running very stable business, and then we can lower the price to charge. So we basically pricing at risk to our customers. So here you can see different customers. This is a real number, but we use the technology before. Some companies we can use we call the combined price, because they run their business together very safely, very stable. For some customers, we can charge more money for them. We see also in future that not only retail, but also for the generation side, for Goldwind, if we win this business, we must be first to become a technology company instead of just like a power generation or turbine manufacturer company. So we are, as we see, particularly in the trading part, we see we must be a very good technology-based company instead of a relationship-based company, because we have observed all those relationship-based company in China, gradually they go bankruptcy, they disappear. So we see that technology, the digital part of uh, of business is very, very critical. So this is for Goldwind and for Goldwind's electricity trading. Thank you. David, back to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Alan, for your interesting presentation. Actually, I didn't know that Goldwind can provide all these services together with wind turbine manufacturer. And I was wondering if what's the plan of the company for the installation in Europe, for example, in Italy. I have seen some interest in it for the European sector for new installation, or you are more focused in the Asian market, in the Chinese market for your business in the next year?
Well, you see that we become more and more global, and of course, in China, we've been very good in the past. And now we see, first out for you, I can tell you some number that among all the export turbine in China, Goldwind, I think is taking 60% export, and we've been seeing that like Asian, like South Africa, has become very important international market for us. So we put more focus on there. Meanwhile, like Europe and US is technology leading region. So we have to learn from the companies and practices from Europe and Africa and America, and to apply here in China and other regions of globe. So this is the overall plan. So we see us not only in China, but we must become a very active player in the globe. So this is the overall plan here for Goldwind.
Thank you. Thank you again. In the meantime, I checked the question in the chat, and I can see any other question from the audience. So I thanks again our speakers for giving us this information from two key parts of the world, the European and the Chinese perspective about the digitalization, markets and assets. And of course, I don't know if Stefan is here with us, if he wants to add something, or if we would like to present also the new conference we will have next year.
Yeah, well, I mean, thank you very much for this very good session, which unfortunately, yeah, there was some short-term problem here, but I think it gives us a little bit a flavor of what happens in the future. I enjoyed very much again listening to you, and of course, Davide, we will announce it in the next session, in the closing session. You will host the next World Wind Energy Conference in Italy. Of course, we should already invite everyone because that is next year. So we will see more digitalization for sure in the future, and be happy about all the contributions in this sector. So I think that is something where all countries will develop very rapidly in the next months and years to come, because just renewables require it, but in general we see this digitalization trend.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Stefan. Yes, of course, we will be pleased to have your participation also for the next year in June. Okay, so if there are no other comments, I think we can close this session. And I thanks again all the participants and all the audience for the time they pass with us.
So the invitation.
Okay, bye.
Okay, thank you. Thank you,
Thank
David.
you.
Stefan,
Thank you very
Stefan,
much.
Stefan,
Thanks.
bye-bye.
Bye bye. Bye bye, Ellen. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.
Jan. Bye bye, Davide.